We will go ahead and get started with our program this evening. I would like to thank everyone for being here. Let's see if we got everyone. There we go. My name is Michelle Ritter, and I'm a member of Mercer Island Parent Edge, and we're so glad you joined us this evening. We are happy to provide this program tonight in conjunction with our friends at Mercer Island Youth and Family Services. And tonight's program is on supporting school reentry for our middle and high school students. For those of you who aren't familiar, Parent Edge is an organization within the Mercer Island PTA Council, and we provide programming in our community, and our goal really is to encourage dialogue on a variety of topics. And so we're so glad that you're here this evening to hear from our school counselors and to share your concerns and your thoughts about what you're seeing with your students as we re-enter into a somewhat normal year, but still not quite normal as we had all hoped. Hold on just a second, I'll advance here. We would like to thank our group of parent volunteers who help make this programming possible. And if you like our programming, we are always looking for more team members to join our team, and you can email us to learn more. Really great group that we talk a lot about what's happening in our community, and we always love to bring new voices to our group and really hear different perspectives. So if you're interested, please do reach out and let us know how you'd like to get involved. We would like to share some information about some upcoming programs that you would be interested in. On October 6th, we encourage you to join us for our Well-Balanced Student Program. We are partnering this year with Challenge Success, which is a group out of Stanford University. And the Well-Balanced Student Program is for parents of all ages of students, really kindergarten through high school. And what our goal is to talk about those pressures that might be on our students that create anxiety and that help them, that prevent them from having maybe as great of experience as they could in school. And I'm going to read the description only because it does a much better job of explaining what Challenge Success does. And it talks about the increasing demands on students may lead to unhealthy stress, resulting in burnout, disengagement, or debilitating physical and mental health symptoms, and talking about sometimes we have unintentional but damaging effects on students with the pressure that is placed on them. And in this program, we'll explore how to reduce academic stress and disengagement without sacrificing the achievement, and also learn how to establish healthier home and school environments for school-age children. So we really encourage you to attend that program. It's going to be a great discussion and some really practical tips on how you can support your students. And then following that, on November 9th, we're offering the Healthier Approach to College Admissions. And that program is designed for parents of kids in 8th grade to 12th grade. And 8th grade is probably even a little young too, but we know some parents are already thinking about those things for their students. So we really encourage you to come to that program. And for the Healthier Approach to College Admissions, it's research-based, and it addresses some of the important questions that they're hearing from families, such as, what do college rankings really measure? Are students who attend more selective colleges better off later in life? And what is fit and why does it matter? And so people who attend this program will learn practical strategies to help reduce the unnecessary pressure around the college admissions process. And we really encourage all parents to attend that, especially if you have high school kids and you're starting to talk about college with them. And then every year we partner with the Forefront group to bring youth suicide prevention for parents. Wonderful program, learn very practical skills about how to talk to your kids or even talk to their friends when you worry that a teen might be in crisis. So I very much encourage you to attend those programs. They are all virtual. You can sign up to attend, and we are recording the program. So if you're not able to attend in person, we will send out the recording after the fact.
Oh, there's going to be a recording.
And we would like to talk about tonight's program. We're offering this program once again, as I mentioned, in partnership with Mercer Island Youth and Family Services. We have 3 wonderful counselors here with us this evening. In addition, we have Derek Franklin and Tamby Cork with Youth and Family Services, and we'd like to thank them for supporting this program. And tonight we want to really provide parents with tools to support our kids as they adjust to their return to school. And we know that many of us are still worried about physical health of our kids. Tonight, we're really going to focus on the mental well-being of our students. There are some great resources in our community if you do have questions about how COVID is being handled in the schools and how you can help your students physically. Mercer Island School District had a wonderful webinar on a safe return to school community. And I can bring that, or I will be sending that out to the group after the fact. So if you didn't get a chance to watch that, I highly encourage that. There's some great information from our school nurses and from the administration about what's being done in the schools. And as well, you can reach out to your pediatrician or your family doctor with those medical questions. But tonight's program, we really want to focus on mental health. We will have a brief presentation by our panelists, and then we will open it up to question and answers from all of you. We have an opportunity for you to ask your questions through the chat. And then if you'd like to ask your question anonymously, you can send it through the chat to Lori Cohen-Sanford, one of our Parent Edge members, who will be taking those questions and will ask on your behalf if you'd like to ask anonymously. So just look in the chat for Lori's name, and I believe she has a Q&A by her name as well. And we are recording our program, as I mentioned, so we will share it out after the program. And I would like to introduce our counselors for this evening. We have Harry Brown, who's a YFS counselor at Islander Middle School, Chris Harnish, who is a YFS counselor at the high school, and Julie Wood, who is a YFS consultant and also has a practice where she works with kids and families. And then I did want to take a moment to introduce, since you're all parents of either high school or middle school, we have a new counselor at the high school who has just joined us, and we would like to welcome Caleb Visser. He will not be part of tonight's program, but you will have an opportunity to meet him later, or just know that he is a resource at the high school as well, if you have any questions. So I'm going to turn it over to Harry, and I will grab his screen so you can share your presentation. Sorry, I'm looking for the wrong one. Hold on. I love Zoom. I should know by now what I'm doing, but you know, it just never works out the way you think it will. There it is.
All right.
Can you all see that?
You're able to see it?
I can.
Good. I can see it.
I wasn't sure if I was going to be sharing or you were, but I'm happy.
Nope, you've got it.
I got it. Okay. Well, it's wonderful to be here, and it's just great to see all the wonderful programming that Parent Edge is doing and the partnership we have. And I'm thinking back to months ago when we were doing this and we were in the midst of COVID, and now we're fortunate to be back in school full force, but it's presenting some interesting challenges, and some of those were anticipated and some of them weren't. And I'm sure you may be experiencing some of the same things in your home. And so
Harry, I'm going to stop for 1 second. I did forget. We wanted to start off also by taking a poll, and I think this will help inform what people are thinking. So I apologize. I forgot my one piece. So we wanted to just put up a quick poll on your screen to see what are the top 3 behaviors you are noticing in your child. And this will help give us an idea of what everyone is experiencing or what you're seeing. So if you can click on up to 3, you can do 1 or 2, but if there's 3, can everyone see that?
I can see it, Michelle.
Okay. So if you can click on your top 3 behaviors that you're noticing in your child. And if you look on the right side, there's a gray bar. You should be able to scroll. There might be one hiding at the bottom. The last question or the last item is increased confidence. So if you see that one, you've seen them all. So we'll give everyone a chance to indicate their top 3. We'll give you a few more seconds. Still some people that are answering.
We've got about half participants on, so maybe just a few more seconds.
Okay. For those of you just coming in, if we just put up a poll, if you want to indicate the top 3 behaviors that you're noticing in your child, that'll help us inform our presentation for this evening. A few more people. Okay, we'll give you till 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Thank you, those of you who were able to respond to the poll, and I will share, just we have an idea. So it looks like there's a lot of enthusiasm about returning to the social setting of school, which is great. The other top ones were trouble reconnecting with friends or making friends, increased anxiety, challenge with time management and organization. It's great to see that there is some increased confidence and excitement about school and learning, issues with sleep. We're having that in our family. Okay. Harry, I will let you continue then. Sorry for the interruption.
No, I'm really glad we did that. And I don't think that surprises any of us, and especially us as professionals who are working in the school. And it is great. I mean, we see that enthusiasm. Kids are excited to be back. And it's balancing that excitement with actually having them kind of recognize the social structure and being in a classroom or in an assembly and being able to curb their enthusiasm about being together. And that's about sitting next to one another when they're supposed to be on dots that are 3 feet apart and all kinds of things that we're trying to mitigate risk. And at the same time, try to get some instruction and structured socialization going. So we do see what you're talking about. So tonight I'm going to share some information with you, and it comes from the same group, the Washington Department of Health, and it's Kira Massoth, who's a psychologist who leads this group and has put together a lot of information about the impact of COVID on families, on educators, on first responders. And so this information was being pushed out, and it comes out almost quarterly, and really think that's a great place for us to get grounded, because I think going with this research-based information can inform us and think about how do we want to respond. So I've adapted their presentation some to condense it so that we can really make sure we have time for question and answer too. So the things we're going to try to cover here today are, one, understanding the impact of disasters on behavioral health. We're not going to spend too much time on that, but just to get a sense of what is the reason behind what we're maybe seeing in our children and in ourselves as well. Behavioral health considerations for students returning to the classroom, thinking about that a bit. And I'm going to be sharing this with our staff at IMS as well. There's a specific section for parents. There's a section for teachers as well. And I'll put that in the chat at some point so you can download the PDF that all this is based on, so you can get even more information. And they have links to all kinds of things, including feelings charts, all kinds of great information. It's a really incredible resource that the DOH has put together. And then some ideas about building resilience during this phase of reconstruction and recovery, which is where we're at right now. And then thinking about communication and connection, because connection is one of the essential keys to resilience. And we're thinking about that intensely at school. How do we support students in reconnecting? And one of the big challenges has been, where am I going to do my Monday and Friday lunch groups? And I think I found a space where we can get kids together and still follow the guidelines that our nurse and the CDC has put forth, but really thinking intensely about how do we create connection. And I'm sure you may be doing that at home as well. And how do you do that in the community with your children? I wanted to show you this graph, and this has really fascinated me since it first came out, and I saw it about 1.5 years ago. And you can see that what we're 18, 19 months into this thing now. And we've gone through that impact, the heroic phase, the honeymoon, disillusionment, right? And then that kind of big dip at about 1 year, and then kind of coming back up. And then we have more complications. So you can see it's not a straight arrow at a nice 45-degree going up into recovery and reconstruction. And in fact, there are many bumps on the road. And we're going to talk briefly about some of the things that have impacted that. But it's important for us to take in consideration that we're on a bit of a roller coaster. I think it's reasonable to think that we're not going to become derailed completely, but that it is a roller coaster. There are going to be ups and downs. There are going to be challenges. And I was thinking about this today. One of the things that they talk about in the report is that during this time of reconstruction, there can be even more presentation of behavioral symptoms during this time. It's kind of like your kid holds it together all day at school and comes home and loses it. And you try talking to one of us as counselors about my kid has all kinds of issues. They're coming home and they're melting down. And it's as if we don't believe you because at school they're fine. And we understand. So it's kind of like we're in this phase of people letting go a little bit about everything they've been holding on to. And I think we see that in greater society at large, frustration, anger. And so things are coming out that can be a challenge, but we need to be able to be flexible and adaptable, absorb those things, try not to be too reactionary. And we'll talk about all of that. So unfortunately, it's a bit of an up and down as we go through this, but I think if we're informed, we can present ourselves and be ready to adapt to what's going on as we do get into recovery. And Chris, I think you're up.
I don't know how that mute button always seems to hide. It's the elusive mute. So the study found a variety of factors that influence recovery or the speed of recovery in that particular process. I just wanted to highlight a couple that I'm hearing from students that seem to be topics of concern or constant themes that come up. And one of those is that social political climate, things like to vax or not to vax, to mask or not to mask, some of the politicalization that's gone on in different parts of our state and parts of the region and parts of the country around that. I think that can be particularly confusing for young people and where are they going with that. We had the whole Black Lives Matter thing blew up right in the midst of COVID last year. And I think that was a stressor for a lot of our families and a lot of the people in our community. The human rights concerns about different things that are going on around the world right now. Those are all contributing factors to their emotional well-being and can influence how quickly they recover or the speed of their recovery process. I guess in addition to that, now that this next wave of the infection is hitting, more uncertainty and what are the impacts, what are the restrictions going to be, how is that going to impact me as a student, as a family, as an athlete. There's a lot of uncertainty and what's that going to mean for me? You know, our previous classes missed out on a lot of those normal kind of high school traditions, which was difficult. And these underclassmen saw that. And I think there is in the back of their mind a wonder, a worry, a fear that maybe they too could be missing out on some of these significant events in their high school experience. A few other key things to know. Next slide, Mr. Brown. I guess I touched on some of this. Teens, wondering about what their future is going to be and that fear of missing out. Could the end of the year be impacted with prom or graduation, and how's this COVID-19 and the virus going to impact that? We're also seeing parents that are from households where they move back and forth between separated or divorced parents and the struggles related to that, social distancing, travel restrictions, maybe if it's a blended family and you have elders in the house that are at higher risk. And so that contributes to our kids' mental health and their mental wellness and that level of worry or concern. And also, trying to navigate that all has an impact on our bodies, our minds, and emotions, and that can be traumatizing. And that trauma, you feel that throughout your life, and there's that sense of instability or safety, and you worry about yourself, you worry about your kids, you worry about your relatives, and it can all contribute to that. A few other key things that I wanted to note. As children, teens, and parents, caregivers, you got to navigate that return to in-person learning. And we're seeing a lot of anxiety. Kids that were managing that at home because they had a controlled environment, they could log on, they may or may not turn their camera on, but then they find themselves back in the high school environment in the commons with hundreds of kids at lunchtime or having to face teachers, other students that maybe they don't have a strong friend base with. And so that has brought up a variety of different issues for kids. And this process, this kind of traumatization, is something that could go on for a couple of years, as the research shows, as people move their way through that. And it's something that we're planning for at the high school. And I think we're seeing more mental health stuff this year than we have prior. Harry, anything else you want to add? Julie?
No.
No, I don't think so.
All right. So we're going to touch on some of the common reactions to reopening or return to work and school. As noted in the poll, there's a lot of excitement, a lot of happiness, a lot of energy. Kids get to go back to be with their friends. They get to return to structure. They get to re-engage in.
Sorry, Julie, you went on. Hold on.
Julie went on mute.
There we go. And so the excitement, the happiness, the higher energy, that's all very real. Side by side with that is also evidence in the poll, a fair amount of anxiety and fear and threat and dread. At the farthest, most negative end is the idea of threat or dread that, and in a pandemic, that someone very close to the child or the teen could get sick, could die. Certainly in families, extended communities and extended families, some of our kids are coming back with very real and first experiences of severe illness and death, and that's part of the whole mix. And then the day-to-day anxieties and fears about homework and how will I fit in socially? Can I catch up? What have I missed? And the lack of structure. All of our kids have now had a spring of 1 year and then an entire academic year of a profoundly different structure. So the anxiety of simply adjusting to something new, having to relearn. At the beginning, we all had to relearn how to do remote work and remote school. And that was 1.5 years. It's just as powerful a relearning to go back to what it's like to be in person, but with more anxiety in the milieu. And then the ambivalence of it's good, it's bad, the mixed feelings. And for some people that can feel like sort of watching from the sidelines, of approaching things with more guard, of being more cautious than they might typically be. And so all of this can be going on with our kids and teens, and that's on top of all of their already brewing adolescent energies, highs and lows. Do the next slide. Common responses to disaster for kids and youth. We'll walk through sort of categories in which researchers think about symptomology or how we all respond. Emotionally, from childhood well into adulthood, we may see more clinginess, more anxiety being separated from loved ones, more preoccupation with death and illness and sadness and being afraid and thinking about the reoccurrence. Could this happen again? In light of the pandemic, that's likely to show up as, is somebody in my family going to get sick? Am I going to get sick? Interestingly, among the teens, the most common fear I've heard, not is I'm going to get sick, but am I going to make grandma or grandpa sick? Am I going to make my mom who's immune compromised sick? But the tremendous guilt and burden of worrying about, will I get somebody else sick? Cognitive, which is super important thinking about return to school, is when any of us are excessively stressed or anxious, it's hard to concentrate, it's hard to focus. We know that it's really difficult for the stressed brain to learn new information, to take it in and retain it. And intrusive thoughts, memories, images may pop into our minds. So particularly thinking about some of our kids who've had very concrete losses, whether that's the illness or death of a family member, or the fallout of change of job, change of home, taking a blow economically, or the ripple in a larger community of death or illness. Those may create intrusive thoughts and memories for kids. And particularly in young people, we see the potential of sort of regression to earlier development. So when you think about what your 17-year-old might have been like going off to junior year, and you're thinking, gosh, they're sort of much more emotional, they're much more edgy, they're more snappy, you can think about regression. That might be a little bit of sliding back to the more insecurity of 13, 14, 15-year-olds. And so it's not surprising when any of us are this significantly stressed that in kids you see a return to earlier levels of development. Physically, we saw this in the poll: sleep disturbances, nightmares, bad dreams, hyperactivity, but not like in the clinical sense, like agitated, like gotta move more, fidgety. And then certainly in younger kids, we'll see more tummy aches, headaches, return of bedwetting. For adolescents, we're more likely to see the sleep disturbance, unable to fall asleep, mind is racing, or sleeping too much. Behaviorally, you may see in your kids episodes of crying, increase in snappiness or aggression, more irritability, more fatigue, and not fatigue that's as much about sleeping, but fatigue that's about mental fatigue. It's a lot to go from being at home primarily or in your little COVID pod to a huge middle school or a huge high school. That's just a lot of sensory stimulation. And the brain gets tired. And so some of the fatigue we're seeing in kids is really about adjustment and less about sleep. And then in very young kids, you're likely to see these worries come out in play. In adolescents, you're more likely to see this come out as kids talk with each other and they have much more sophisticated adult-like questions, concerns, more existential worries. And I think, as Harry or Chris was saying, in the current social and political climate, certainly adults are having this pervasive sense of unrest, and our older teens are certainly going to share that. And it's important for us to bear in mind that they are experiencing that sort of collective unrest with emerging abstract thinking, but not adult sophistication thinking. And so hearing their concerns and taking them seriously is really important. So what can we do as adults who love and care about kids, your own, your neighbors, those in your family, school staff who care about kids? Listen, listen, listen. I know myself as a parent and talking with lots of parents, so much we want to share, how we might make it easier or how to reassure them. But sometimes we just need to listen. And being able to ask open-ended things. So not yes or no questions, but how you thinking, how you feeling, what hit you about this. Sometimes adolescents don't want any questions. And so being able to sort of do your own inner monologue, your own wondering, I've been hearing about, and I'm wondering if this is happening to you, but refraining from a question helps kids sort of settle into their own thinking and maybe be more willing to share with us sometimes. Being able to reflect, okay, so you're saying this happened and this happened. And being able to stay present. So whether you agree with your child's perspective or the way they responded to your care or your question, being able to stay in a stance of, my intent is to care, my intent is express concern, and go back. So when we summarize and they say, no, you got it all wrong, being able to go back like, okay, so tell me some more about that, because I got it wrong. Like, what am I missing here? So really maintaining as much as possible an open, non-judgmental, empathetic response, even when kids are cranky. It's a tall order for parents. We've all been there, and yet we know it works. And as a parent, you're likely to feel also really good and more connected with your kids when you can listen actively. We'll focus more on the adolescent frame, but in terms of family communication, anytime you can talk, the better. And it's often more organic, unplanned, on the drive to soccer, in the morning, puttering over breakfast. Kids talk when they feel like talking, and we're all better off as adults if we try to be open and receptive and ready, as opposed to planning a conversation. In your own coping with anxiety, think about slowing down your own process. So slowing down your breathing, slowing down your conversation, that helps reduce anxiety for you and your kids and teens. Thinking about what do particularly adolescents are very interested in the future. What are they wanting? What are they hoping for? And what do they see as possible? I think given everything that's happened in the last 2 years or so, some kids are really facing, for the first time in their lives, big questions about the state of the planet, the state of society, what they are experiences as social injustice, or what they experience as their role and what they aspire to be and what they want to do. And staying really engaged and helping kids stay in a modulated state. We see that term regulated communication, that we can have difficult conversations without raising our voices. We can have difficult conversations. We can even disagree. And sticking with I statements, that helps a lot, particularly with adolescents.
So we're going to take a look briefly at anxiety and school refusal. There can be a lot more, but just thinking about our students who are anxious and are having some challenges, I want you to be tuned into that, because the earlier we can address that, the easier it is to mitigate it. And so we know so many students are excited, but there are some students who they're very excited to be back at school and be with their friends, but they're finding themselves overstimulated in the classroom or in large settings at lunch or different places where kids are getting together. Some classrooms seem to be more crowded than others, or there's more energy. So we need to really support them and understand and hear what's going on, as Julie was talking about. And we know that to conquer fear and anxiety, it's with gradual exposure to the fear event combined with safety. So school is a safe place, and really want to encourage you to reach out to our counseling team members if this is something that's going on, so we can really help your child stay within the program and do the things they need to do with our support. I like this idea of, once we'll put the training wheels on as we need to and give that support, but we want to keep them moving forward. And once we get through that fear, they can ride on their own. So we have to overcome that fear. And if it's something you're running into, and we do have some kids, not as many as we anticipated though, and I would say that's really a positive thing. But the longer your student is avoiding coming to school or potentially avoiding going to class, the harder it becomes for us to address that. I really appreciate this model they put up here, working with anger and hostility using the SAFE model for de-escalation. And I'm not necessarily talking about a huge blow up, because hopefully you can address it before it gets too big. But we know that one of the ways, especially middle schoolers and older teens can express all kinds of emotion, can often begin with anger. And I used to do these anger management groups, and we talk about first feelings and identify that first feeling. But it really, if you are in a situation where tensions are rising and things are escalating, as Julie was pointing out in that earlier slide, the need to slow down and the need to, starting with S, check yourself and realize if you're reacting, and if you can get yourself to a place of calm. And if you're not, you may have to say to your teen, I need a few minutes before I can talk about this. Let's take some space. I'll take a break. We'll come back in 5 minutes. Or if you have a partner in the home, you may need to tag team with them, almost like a WWE wrestling match. Don't be the one to take the heat. If you're reactive and it's not an issue, my wife and I used to tag team all the time and just have to step away. So if you're fortunate, you have that partner who's available, that isn't always the case, utilize them or step aside. And really, different things would activate me than they do my wife, that's for sure. And you may need to really be aware and know if it's a repeating pattern, who's going to be able to step in to really be there. And especially for dads, and I don't mean to get too specific about gender, but really being aware of your body posture. And I know especially my daughter, her hearing seemed quite a bit more sensitive than our son's. I could talk very loud to him and he would have no reaction. And if my intonation went up at all with our daughter, why are you screaming at me? So, and just our physical presence. So we need to get to a posture where we're neutral and we're not putting ourselves in a position we're trying to power over, but where our child is clearly having a reaction to something and being able to think about it in that perspective. What is this behavior about? What is the meaning of this? And to stay calm. And then area awareness, where are you? being non-threatening. And this is something for our teachers as well, to not be making young people feel like they're trapped in any way, because that's just going to exacerbate that anger and feelings. I alluded to this before, and Dr. Dan Siegel talks about this: name it to tame it, and really identifying that first feeling. And I challenge young people when they're talking about their anger to think about what's under that anger. And oftentimes it's confusion, it's hurt, it's betrayal, it's all kinds of things. And unfortunately, our society tends to really validate people when they're angry and yelling and screaming, instead of saying, as Julie was making the note of that, making an I statement: I feel when, because. And I think this is a great time to make sure you have a feelings chart at home and to really work on that feelings vocabulary. And there are a number of different ones. I'd be happy to send them out. Like I said, I'll put the PDF of this report, and there's actually a link to a feelings chart in there. But really building that feelings vocabulary. And we know research has shown that if you can name what you're feeling, it actually engages that prefrontal cortex, and you're going to get out of that limbic system, the fight or flight response, that much faster. A good breath, name how you feel, and then open the door to connection and dialogue. And that's where the engagement piece comes in. And it's being able to engage, to let your young person know that you're there for them, that you support them. Something must be going on for them to be feeling things so intensely, and giving them an opportunity to calm down so you can process what's going on. Because we know when people are in that fight or flight or freeze or faint mode, that it's going to take 15, 20 minutes, maybe longer. I mean, you know your children. You know how long it takes them to get back to a place where they're regulated. And we talked about dysregulation and then regulation, and you're not going to do any effective problem solving when someone is dysregulated, whether it's you or your child. So need to get to that place of calm to help things de-escalate, because I think my own experience just in the community, people are ready to go off. I think everybody's trying to hold it together. Lots of transitions we've been talking about. So not being surprised when we see these big reactions, not being shocked, but being able to take a breath, calm ourselves down, engage in communication about how someone's feeling, and work from there.
So looking at what are some individual protective factors? How do we create resilience in ourselves and our kids and our families? Having a sense of humor. What's the old saying? If you don't laugh, you cry. Trying to have some levity in the moment. That can be a way of diffusing an intense situation, but utilizing some humor. And I think using some active coping skills, mindfulness in particular. I know Harry and I last year offered a parent, we called it Monday Mornings with MIYFS, and we introduced some ideas around mindfulness, directed breathing, around how to be centered. And it's not something that you have to sign up for a class or you have to do other than maybe download an app. There's My Life as an app. There's, help me out, Harry.
We have a list of them. One of the last slides.
Maybe we can post those, but it's about coping and learning some new skills, some new ways of thinking and feeling when you're dealing with adversity, when you're dealing with challenges in your life. I talk about being able to control the controllables. So exercise, diet, getting enough sleep, moderating how much alcohol or other drugs you're using. All those things can be factors in your ability to cope. Having a religious or spiritual community can be really helpful, whether it be your church, your synagogue, your whatever your particular faith is, and the people and the individuals there can be a real helpful and protective factors. And then having problem solving skills and good social skills and working with yourself and your young people around, Harry mentioned it, using I statements, being able to take space when things get heated and have a productive conversation 10 minutes down the road instead of having two people that are not able to hear each other. But having those kind of communications and social skills can be really helpful in these times. And then some family protective factors, having a good relationship with your child and maybe seeking out some services if there are some bumps in the road. I like to talk about mediation versus therapy or counseling. Sometimes it can be helpful to have a third party to try to work some things out, and a young person feels like they have a voice there. And sometimes in a triad or a Yeah, triad. You're able to accomplish some things that you can't as individuals or as families. Parents who get along is helpful. Our young people can really be really good at splitting parents if you're not on the same page. And parents aren't always on the same page, but do that behind closed doors so you can come to some kind of a mutual agreement before you approach your kid, because they're very skilled at dividing and conquering. Allowing a child to have a valued role in the household, giving them beyond just the chores, right? Giving them a sense of responsibility, earning some responsibility, maybe some additional freedoms, maybe it taking on a greater responsibility with a pet or in the garden, those type of things where it's something that they have some ownership to and they feel good about themselves and the ability to feel a part of that family unit, that they're a contributor.
All right, we're going to talk about some active coping techniques. You heard both Carrie and Chris talk about we're fostering resilience and protecting our vulnerabilities when we can cope actively. One of the defining elements of trauma is that it overrides the system's, our mind, our body, our spirit's capacity to cope. It can leave people feeling that they have limited control in their lives and a sense of helplessness, which is important to acknowledge, is best lived with when one knows what works for them individually for active coping. And to be active coping is a sense of agency, a sense of I have something I can do. What Chris was saying about controlling the controllables. There's so much in a global pandemic and in social and political unrest that we can't control, but there are things we can control. So when people are really anxious, thinking about what helps calm you from a sensory perspective, taking a drink, having either soothing or energizing music, thinking about showers, baths. I think for teens, anything that's cozy, fuzzy slippers, gigantic sweatshirts.
I've seen a lot of fuzzy slippers this year at school, more than usual, that and pajama pants.
I was gonna say pajama pants. I feel like I've seen more pajama pants in my office than I have in my entire career. And mindfulness focused breathing. So minimally, all you need to say to your littlest littles, thinking about from sort of age 2 and up, let's stop and take a deep breath. And with your young kids, modeling it, and young, I mean even middle schoolers, like, let's just take a deep breath. And it's beautiful modeling for your older adolescents about, I know what it's like to be stressed. I get stressed too, because of course, adolescents forget that all of you had experiences that were stressful in your own adolescence. So being able to model and help your team think about like, hey, let's just take a pause, couple deep breaths, and then we'll come back to this. Active coping, again, controlling the controllables, thinking about sleep and sleep hygiene. And that's the clinical term for these very simple behaviors. Go to bed at the same time, wake up at the same time, make sure your room is cool and comfortable temperature-wise, that you've got the right cozy blankets. We all know some people love their feather light comforter and other need a weighted blanket. And so helping your teen think about how do they feel best so that they can go to sleep. Thinking about what you eat and drink and how that may disrupt sleep. And that can be very particular to each person. And staying off of anything that emits blue light. So staying off your phone, your laptop, but things that are going to be mentally stimulating. And one of the things that you can do that's active coping when your sleep is disrupted is that kind of like, oh, my head is spinning. I've got so many thoughts spinning around. Keep a notepad, a paper notepad, paper and pen by your nightstand. And teens are really good at this. It's like journaling. If something's bugging you, write it down so you can put it away for the night and you can think about solving the problem tomorrow. But being able to put parameters around, this is my time for calming and resting. The boundaries piece is very much our task as parents, even with teens, helping teens stay on a regular structure. One of the things that I saw, and I'm sure some of you experienced with your kids, is without the structure of school, other structures fell apart. So things like going to bed and getting up and showering and putting clothes on instead of living in pajamas and sweats all day. And so your job as a parent, even with your older adolescents, although it might be more a coaching role as opposed to a sort of do what I say role, is helping them restructure their lives. And that can be active coping. Thinking if you're concerned about watching your kids look like they are more depressed, or it looks like sleeping is more about mood than about regular sleep and fatigue, being able to think about what makes me feel good, literally making a list and doing some of those every day. Think about small steps. Think about movement of any kind. I think one of the beautiful new structures that I saw families doing all over, not just like in my office, but in my neighborhood, is I saw more families walking together over the course of the last year and a half than I've ever seen. And there are all sorts of ways in which you can help your teen lift their mood when they're down. And you don't need to talk about it. You can all take a bike ride or a walk or a hike. You're just together. You're doing something that's good for both of you. And then being able to connect. And that may be direct connection, like talking about something. It also may be just hanging out, knowing that you're not alone, knowing that you can hang out with mom, dad, siblings, extended family, and just be. And knowing that as a parent, it's okay to just, even when your kid is depressed, to just sort of let them be. They'll talk when they're ready to talk. Okay, so summarizing, how do we develop resilience? And this is for us as adults and for kids. What's your purpose? What gets you up in the morning? How do you feel good about yourself? How do you remind yourself of that on a day-to-day basis? And this can be intentional. You've probably heard, and some of you probably have practiced gratitude journals. Sometimes it helps to really take a pause in the morning or at evening before you retire for the day about what was meaningful in your day. We know that for people, kids and adults who are well connected, that is one of the primary determinants in how they weather a traumatic event or a difficulty. When you are connected to people who know and love you, you do better. And this can be really difficult. And when I think about all the kids who've been isolated because of the pandemic, some have worked really hard to maintain their connections. And for some, it was just too much work to maintain their connections. And there's a whole group for whom they would have made a whole lot of organic connections had they been in school, but you can't make those organic connections when you're on Zoom together. And so while thinking about nurturing the connections you do have, and for you as parents, staying really connected to your kids, I think also making space for how's my child managing the stress of forging new connections, of getting to know the kids in their class, getting to know who trusted and safe adults are at the school, particularly for the kids who have started a new school. So for all those kids who were supposed to start middle school, but then didn't, and so this is their first time in, but it's their second year, or for those kids who were supposed to start freshman year but didn't, they're coming in as if they have missed a whole year of forging connections, and that will be a really important part of their health and development this year. Thinking about how can we be flexible, adaptable, how do we stay connected? I'm sure all of you have had different varieties of how do we use Zoom, how do we use Skype calls, how do we use FaceTime, how are we together but physically separate, and thinking about when we all learned how to do screen time, how to set parameters around that so you're not easily fatigued, so you're not as fatigued. And that was really hard on kids. I mean, as much as we think most of them like screen time, to do your learning on a screen is incredibly mentally fatiguing. And now they're relearning how to do it all in person. And so giving yourself and your kids some time and space to make those adjustments, And then hope. Hope is grounded in reality. It's important to acknowledge this has been a hard year. It's been a hard couple of years. Hope is only real and valuable when it also matches reality. So think about Instead of threat, we've got a challenge to meet, we've got problems to solve. And if there's a real threat, being real about the real threat. For those of you whose families have endured severe illness and possibly death, you've had a different experience of the threat of the pandemic than for those for whom that experience is further away. And then thinking about in the bigger picture of any child or teens or families or parents experience, what is their pre-disaster experience? What vulnerabilities might you have come into this experience with? What vulnerabilities did your kids already come into this experience with, where the pandemic then was just one stressor too much? That's going to impact how, that's going to influence how the pandemic and re-entry impacts your child.
So just some thoughts to keep in mind as we're wrapping up, to be aware of your internal state, recognize when you're feeling calm versus anxious, and model getting back to that place of calm. I really think this is essential for your student to have a list of things that they can do to manage their stress when they're distressed, and have those go-tos and have everybody know them. Your child, my kids used to say to me sometimes, Dad, I think you need to take a little space. You can have that kind of dialogue between yourself and your child and support them and really give them structure to how they can manage what their internal experience is. And then modify, you may have to modify and adjust your goals for yourself, for your child, and be realistic about what the expectations that you have for them now. And we were talking before this presentation, is that our kids are incredibly resilient if we give them the space to regroup and to get themselves back on their feet and to feel secure and positive about themselves and their connections. And they can recover from this. And we need to trust that resiliency and not be putting too much pressure or really any unnecessary pressure on them right now. I really appreciate what's happening at the middle school in terms of grading and taking a step back from some homework expectations and really focusing on having students be able to demonstrate what they're learning and not get too hung up on what may seem to many students as kind of busy work and what's the point. So really wanting things to be an authentic experience of learning and for them to feel supported and confident as they go forward. And then having some healthy rewards for dealing with challenging situations. And that can really be time together. Let them figure out, what are you going to do together as a family? Because you had such a great week. You did the things you needed to do. You had a challenge, you bounced back, allowing our kids to fail forward and rewarding them for getting through those challenges and recognizing when they might have to come up with a new game plan for what they're working on, especially our 6th and 7th graders. I saw time management was a big thing. This is a period where they're learning that, and be that coach, consultant, parent to them and support them in being successful and learning forward. So some of the resources Chris was talking about, this will be shared out, but they have access to this in the self-service app on their iPads. The Stop, Breathe, Think app, I love that because it starts with an emotional and physical check-in, and then it'll generate a variety of different breathing exercises you can do, Headspace, Calm, and Virtual Hope Box. That there's no link to it, but it is an app that they can find. It has all kinds of things for great little short-term distractions versus getting involved in Minecraft or some game that can roll on for hours, but very short puzzle-like things. These are some resources from the Department of Health. And then this is the contact information for myself. I have an intern working with me at IMS this year, master's level family therapy intern, Zach Lopez, terrific person, and Chris and Caleb and Julie. I didn't have contact information for you, Julie, but we can push that out if you want me to add that, okay?
You can get a hold of Caleb just through @mercerislandschools.org, where I don't think I'm an intern anymore.
Oh, geez, yeah, I got that switched around. Yeah. I was copying and pasting. Yeah, good job, Mr. Brown. That's what happens when you're trying to prepare for a presentation and dealing with all kinds of other issues in school.
I feel it. I feel it. Are we rolling into questions now, or where are we at?
Yeah, and I'll adjust this before we push it out.
That sounds great. Yes, we will share all this information after the program as well. So I will see Lori. Do you have any questions you'd like to share with our counselors?
Sure, I have a couple, and this is a great time to roll them in. If you feel comfortable sharing them to everyone, feel free to do that. We'll make sure that they get seen. And if you would like to ask them anonymously, I'm happy to share those. So the first question I have is, there was a conversation that a parent said her child had at the high school, saying there was going to be some sort of lunchtime group, and she was wondering, or he or she was wondering if there was more information about that.
So yeah, Walter Kelly, our principal, I think he pushed out a principal's weekly newsletter, and he also, I think he sent an update, Michelle, to Parent Edge to talk about some of the services that were going to be available this year. A constant theme that we're hearing is young people want an alternative to the commons. It's a big echoey box with hundreds of kids in there during lunch, and it's not really conducive to kids that maybe have sensory issues or that are working on anxiety for transitioning, or they're trying to work on friendships. So I think we're going to be utilizing the library as more a student resource center, and it'll be an alternative there. There's also some plans in the work for offering some mindfulness courses and other emotional regulation kind of self-help, and we'll be utilizing the library, I believe, for those services as well. Details, specifics are coming, but yeah, we're moving that direction. In addition to, Caleb and I are there full-time working with young people, working closely with the guidance counselors and teachers, and we're getting referrals there and working to come up with plans for young people that are struggling currently, and can be the go-between between parents, teachers, counselors, in addition to being an emotional support for the young people. And if needed, we can facilitate referrals to some outside agencies or organizations if needed. You taking clients, Julie?
No, but I'll help somebody find somebody. We actually, I have to say, it is so hard for those of you who are trying parents. It is so hard right now to find a child or adolescent therapist with openings. The good news is I know 2 people who just expanded their practices, and 2 really experienced therapists who just opened up practices. So, but yeah, it's so I'm happy to help people find somebody.
Just to follow up, Chris, to that, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but this specific question, now that I look back on it, was in relation to helping kids make friends. And is there a timeline for any sort of lunchtime groups or any other resources you have at the high school? Because I think that's a very specific, unusual age. And then so many kids, basically they've been out of school for a year plus. And I think that's a concern for a lot of parents.
My suggestion was to get involved with a club, a sport, and an activity, and kind of let it happen organically that way. It's hard to match kids up, unfortunately. And so finding an area of passion through clubs are just now being approved. And so you're going to be starting to see notifications about where and when they're moving. Some of the no-cut sports, it's a little bit late, but like cross country is a great one, great supportive kind of community there where they accept anybody, whether you're a 4-minute mile or you're a 10-minute mile person. But I think, yeah. And maybe service clubs also would be an opportunity where it starts out around a common interest, but then a relationship evolves out of that.
Great, thank you. I think that's really helpful. A band is another great community to join. I know I can speak for my daughter. It's been great for her, so.
Are you tooting your own horn, Lori?
I'm shooting my daughter's trumpet. Okay, moving on. I had a question in the group chat from somebody, and I wanted to bring attention to. What are some strategies that counselors can recommend about talking to kids about their day at school with teens? Is it better to ask about that or give them space? How do you recommend negotiating that with teenagers?
That is such a great question. I saw that come up in the chat. I think that goes along with, like, from the time our kids are in kindergarten, they have to hear, how was your day? And we all know as parents that we get almost nothing. So based on that, you might think about more of the wondering out loud, or thinking about a more focused question. You know, how did that exam go? You know, how'd you feel about the auditions for the play? And that really communicates, I know what's going on in your life. I know how it's going. The other way, I think, particularly for older teens, is you share first, you know, and you're modeling how to deal with difficult times. I had a tough day at work. It was weird to be back in the office. I don't know if you're having that at school. But, you know, make yourself vulnerable first, particularly for teens who are hesitant to talk. Harry, Chris, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I really like that piece about you starting by sharing how your day went. I think fewer questions and more listening goes a lot farther. And I'm always surprised by how much our kids would talk when they're just sitting there. The same thing with the students I work with at school, and give them an opportunity. And sometimes it involves doing an activity, just playing Uno, just doing something. I think being in the kitchen together, helping prepare a meal, having them sit near you when they're doing their homework, and just you can see how it's unfolding, and being there as a support and available. And I think then it'll come to the surface.
Mhm.
Yeah, it can be frustrating. A kid's gone for 8 hours out of the day and you come home and you ask them how things were and it's fine, okay. Monosyllable responses. Yeah.
Mhm.
I do remember hearing a presenter say, surprise your child one day, and when they come home, just say, I'm so glad you're home, and leave it
Oh,
at
I
that.
love that.
And then wait until later in the day, and they'll look at you like, they didn't ask me how school was. And they said, think about when you come home from work and you're exhausted. Do you really want to recount everything that you did all day? So they said, just say, I'm so glad you're home, and walk away. And the kid will probably be there with an open jaw. So
That's great.
I thought that was a great strategy.
Yeah, I think it's a really good one.
I love it.
So I don't have any more questions, but we're open to hearing them. So type them into the chat, or if anyone else has any sort of final words of wisdom to impart. I tried to type a lot of the great takeaways into the chat because there was some really great information, and we'll figure out a way to compile that when we send out the recording. But some really great points tonight. So thank you to all of our counselors for taking extra time on top of their daytime load to support our kids further. Really amazing.
I did have one question, and I think it's something that I've heard parents struggling with is, as we return to somewhat more normal than last year, there's a lot of activities that are opening up, sports, and parents are trying to figure out, they want their kids to be involved again, but how do we know at what speed to re-engage? Because I think we're all still reeling, and how do we get kids involved so that they can re-engage with their friends without having it be too much and create more anxiety?
Mhm.
Well, I think one of the essential things is to get your kids involved in things that they want to be involved in, and really follow their lead as much as possible. I also think it's important for them to be involved in something. So no engagement, I think we have to figure out, present as many opportunities as you can and figure out what it is that they can do, because I think it's essential to have those experiences with other adults, with other kids in different situations. But I really also feel it's just so important to really hear what your child wants to be involved in and think about how you can support that.
Mhm.
Julie, do you have some thoughts about that?
I would echo all of that, and do this slowly. Many kids and adults are talking about, what's been learned during the pandemic. And almost universally, people are saying, there were elements I really liked. I got to hang out with my family all day. I mean, kids are saying that. And I'm sure some of you as parents, while it was difficult working from home, there's this sense of maybe a slower pace of life and shared space and time that an over busy teen doesn't get. The just hanging out and the opportunity, because there was space and time, to cook together, to eat together, to play games together. And I know that there's some pressure both from kids on themselves and from parents around, like, we got to make up for lost time. And whatever you can do within yourself to make peace about the fact that we can't make it up. It's gone, and there have been some wonderful learnings. There have been some extraordinarily difficult times, but the time has passed, and it's a really great time to reset, to, as Harry's saying, have a conversation. And you can do parameters, nothing is not an option, and 5 new activities is also not an option. Let's start with one and see how it feels.
The one theme that I did hear from a lot of your comments when talking about the various issues we've been discussing is the importance of really fostering that communication with your team. And I think at one point here you had talked about not being being more of a consultant. And I think it's a really interesting time for our kids, and especially after being home a year when we were with them all the time. And I just read an interesting book called 14 Talks Before 14. And even for those of you high school students, it's by Michelle Eichert. But one of the things she talks about is actually having a conversation with your teen, saying, you know what, our relationship is going to change a bit. I'm no longer your manager. I'm your assistant manager. And I thought that was really interesting that you have that intentional conversation rather than just making the shift. And it gives some independence and ownership to the child to let them know, like, you're hitting this next level of your development and this is going to change, rather than just assuming they understand it's going to change. And I heard a lot of that conversation from the tips you were giving about really the communication is so important, and also how to have those conversations. So thank you for talking about that.
Hey, Michelle, I like that model, using that template. Like, what if you all sat down at a meal and it was like, hey, we could go back to life as normal, or what we remember as normal, but really, like, we might want to make some changes. We have a chance to reset our family life. So many kids, I think, feel internally pressured, or they got to keep up with their peers. If their peers are doing 3 activities, they need to do 4. But you could have that same intentional conversation about, a lot's changed in a year and a half. You've changed, I've changed. We might want to do family a little bit differently moving forward.
I do know a number of parenting experts talk about the importance of family meetings too. And I think over COVID, that was a lot easier when everyone was home, but trying to keep that as a tradition, I think, is helpful. And for some of us, I mean, since my son got vaccinated, I feel like I haven't seen him. It's like he's trying to make up for all that time that he didn't get to see his friends. So those family
Sure.
meetings could be really important.
No, I think they're really essential. And that's where you can build in those rewards and those connections and incentives for engaging in the world, not necessarily being the top, but engaging in the world and doing the things that give you satisfaction and help you learn and grow. So those meetings, the weekly meeting, and just scheduling, it's a way to reduce anxiety. What are we having for dinner? What do we need to get? What's going on this week? Just getting your schedule. I don't know about you, but I can get so confused right now about my schedule. Just all these different things going. Is a meeting on Zoom, or is it really in the library? You know, where am I going? So taking time as a family, it's a big stress reducer to look at the week that's coming and think about everything from meals to activities and what fun are we going to have together as a family.
I want to underline this because it's also perfect modeling and stress reduction for the kids who are overwhelmed right now with organization. Show them how it's done. Sit together, have a big family map. I know people do it online. Paper is better neurologically, and you can make it colorful and you can make it fun. But you know, helping kids figure out, they've missed 2 years of organizing, and a family meeting can be fun. It doesn't need to be just to solve problems.
You're on mute.
I know, sorry. I was just gonna say that one thing I've noticed in my family is that there's never enough reassurance. And I think just constantly reassuring, and it's almost like our kids have been taught, I know I have sort of taught my child, which I think is both good and bad, that plans change and we need to remain flexible. But the opposite side of that is our kids want something they can count on. So even that question, it's so interesting. I remember my daughter became very obsessed over what we're having for dinner every night, because it was like the one thing that she knew was going to happen. And so I just think reassurance is also really important, and just like letting kids know that there are things they can count on.
And did you sometimes say to her, I don't know, you're making dinner tomorrow night?
Say, let's make it together. What do you want?
I know so many kids who mastered cooking and baking during the pandemic. And I would say to worried parents, listen, it's math, it's planning, it's problem solving, it's following directions, and it's creative.
That's great.
So I don't have any more questions, and we're hitting kind of the end of our time frame. Is there any parting thoughts? Otherwise, I think we're coming up on the end.
I want to say to parents, remember that thing on the airplane, your oxygen mask first. Breathe,
Thank you.
eat, sleep, have some fun, cut yourself some slack, give yourself some grace, give your partner some grace.
And I think Julie, during the elementary program, you had we had talked about for those of us who are trying to make up for lost time, and you had said you can't. And I think that was just a really good reminder that we can't make up for lost time. All we can do is move forward and take what we've learned and use those silver linings and know that we will get through this and we use the tools that we have. So.
And think about the wonderful life lessons your kids got. I mean, this is really odd. You know, I think about my older relatives, you know, who were, say, in the world wars, and our kids are all going to look forward or backwards and be like, God, I was in a global pandemic and there was some good stuff came out of it. It was hard and some good stuff came out of it.
Well, I had a 6th grader in a group last year say, if I can get through this, I think I can do anything.
Oh, that's awesome. That's
So,
perfect.
Resiliency. I
think
love working
that-
with teenagers.
That's what
Yep.
it's about. How do you build
Love
that
it.
resiliency? And it takes being active, engaged in that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Keep it going. You guys are doing great. And if you do have concerns, please reach out to us. And we
Mhm.
want to support you however we can.
Thank you to all the parents for taking time out of your evening to be here to ask questions and to listen. We appreciate it. And we hope you've got some great tips, and we will send out information with resources to share out with your friends and family. And thank you once again. And thank you to our wonderful counselors who your wisdom and support is always appreciated. So we appreciate it.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Lori. Thanks to Parent Edge.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great evening.